The Israeli opposition to the ongoing war in Gaza is growing. Too often the debate is reduced to black and white slogans, but the reality in Israel is increasingly more complex. Many Israelis support the war, believing it necessary after the horrors of October the 7th, but others, reservists, activists, families of hostages, and political leaders, have grown increasingly vocal in opposing the war and opposing Netanyahu. Their criticism reveals moral, strategic, and political fault lines, shaking Israel to the core. In the aftermath of October the 7th, 2023, Israel mobilized on a scale not seen since 1973. About 300,000 reservists reported for duty. The attack by Hamas, which killed 1,200 Israelis and kidnapped over 250, triggered a furious and traumatizing response. At first, there was near total consensus. Hamas had to be defeated. But as the war dragged on for over 20 months, killing over 55,000 Palestinians, many of them civilians, cracks have appeared in Israeli society. Soldiers who once volunteered enthusiastically began to question the mission. What began as a justified act of self-defense started to look to many like an endless, self-defeating occupation that was failing to command even its most basic promise to bring the hostages home. Among the clearest signs of opposition are the reservists themselves. Today in the newspapers, Captain von Feiner, a Haifa University student, refused his fourth call-up after 270 days in uniform. He didn't hide behind medical or psychological excuses. Instead, he declared he could not morally continue as long as Israel pursued a policy of relentless war without change, ignoring the hostages and inflicting massive civilian death. He was jailed briefly, but became a symbol of what is now called grey refusal, quietly growing, politically changing the scene by simply through defiance. Yuval Ben Ari, another reservist, served in Gaza and Lebanon but walked away, appalled by the destruction. He described a humanitarian catastrophe, 2 million people pushed into a fraction of Gaza, constant displacement, children starving. He wrote an article for Haaretz entitled "What I Saw in Gaza, a Soldier's Warning." And he warned that reservists were burning out, losing faith, and that the war was both immoral and strategically counterproductive. Over 12,000 reservists and former officers have signed letters refusing to serve if the war continues, including elite units, pilots, and intelligence veterans. One Air Force reservist called it a revenge war, killing too many civilians. Another described it bluntly: it's not legitimate. Opposition is not limited to soldiers. Civilian protest has grown, even though for much of the war it was taboo to speak out. Activists like Ma'ayan Dak and Yali Maron held silent vigils outside air bases, displaying photos of dead Palestinian children. "Stop, you are killing people," they tell pilots directly. The families of hostages have become one of the most potent sources of dissent. Many accuse Prime Minister Netanyahu of prolonging the war for his own political survival rather than securing their loved ones' releases. In Tel Aviv's Hostages Square, people like Dani Miran, whose son Omri is held in Gaza, plead for negotiations over more attacks. Polling suggests nearly 60% of Israelis would support stopping the war in exchange for bringing hostages home. And their anguish is a sharp moral rebuke to government claims of no choice. They argue that continued bombardment only ensures the hostages remain trapped, if alive at all. Politically, the war has deepened Israel's internal divisions. Netanyahu's far-right coalition partners reject any ceasefire and demand the total destruction of Hamas and even the reoccupation of Gaza. Yet military leaders privately acknowledge there's no clear victory path left. The opposition leader, Yair Lapid, has openly declared the war in Gaza a failure. He calls it a stalemate, a dead end. He proposes involving Egypt in administering Gaza post-war, arguing that Israel must change strategy to avoid endless occupation. Even former generals and national security figures warn of Israel being dragged into potential war crimes. Netanyahu, meanwhile, stands accused of prolonging the conflict to maintain power, shield himself from corruption trials, and hold together a fragile coalition of religious and far-right parties. Critics argue he has prioritized his political survival over national security, even as the war kills soldiers and civilians alike, bankrupts public trust, and isolates Israel internationally. I was asked the other day, did I think that Netanyahu or Putin was worse? Well, I think they share a stage. Both of them are out for themselves, and both of them have become a name that is bigger than they themselves. So Putin may or may not be alive. Who cares? Putinism, the Putin doctrine, is about vengeance, just as the Netanyahu doctrine is about revenge, vengeance. These are two furiously animated creatures who have increasingly abandoned reality. One is in a fridge, the other one is somehow in his own head. Both are wrong. The Israeli occupation to the Israeli opposition to war in Gaza is real, it's diverse, it's growing. It's not a simple case of pro or anti-war slogans that include soldiers who can no longer obey orders they find immoral, families desperate for the return of loved ones, activists trying to reclaim Israel's moral compass, and political leaders who argue the war is unwinnable and strategically disastrous. In the end, these voices demand something deceptively simple but politically explosive: that Israel should choose life over death, negotiation over destruction, genuine security over endless war. Their struggle is not only over Gaza, it's over the soul and the future of Israel itself.